Hello, dear listener. Welcome to the Always Hope podcast, a production of Willwood's Faith and Marriage. This is Dr. Mario Sakasa, and I'm truly grateful to have you joining me today on this amazing episode. Well, have you ever wondered what it means to be your best, or what it feels like to chase a dream, or to be in an environment where you find that your unique skills line up perfectly with the work that you're doing? Or maybe you've never experienced that, and you've been so frustrated trying to be able to have that sense of flow or peak performance. But join me on the podcast to talk about these things and so much more is Sam Blair, former Navy SEAL and co-founder of the Frassati Company. Sam shares about his time as a naval officer, the challenges of having hard conversations with your spouse when dreams and desires aren't lining up between you two, doing ambitious things with the Lord, knowing what is enough, and knowing what peak performance looks like within a work team, how to maintain a sense of personal agency even when things are difficult at work, and also knowing how to discern next steps. This is a great practical episode for you. If you find this episode helpful, however, please share it with one person who you think would benefit from it. Want to be able to spread the good work that we're doing here on the podcast. I also love to be able to hear about your thoughts, so join me on Facebook or Instagram, or leave a comment on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. All right, everybody, well, let's get into this conversation with Sam Blair. Sam Blair, welcome to the Always Hope podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate having you on the show, man. Having this opportunity to talk and share a little bit about the good work that you're doing. Serving people, serving executives, a lot of the great stuff you're doing. I'm looking forward to having a great conversation. So just tell a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself to the audience. What do you got going on, and what you doing these days?
Sure. This is Sam Blair, and I've recently got out of the military. I say recently, I mean, it's been about 2 years, where I was a naval officer for a decade plus, and then came out of the gates as an entrepreneur. So my last tour, my oldest son was 3 when we moved to this assignment, teaching leadership and ethics at the Naval Academy. And I remember my wife looking at me like, "What are we doing?" I said, "Well, we're having fun, right?" She's like, "Not really. Your oldest son is 3. We've lived in 3 different states." I said, "Yeah, that's fair." So that was kind of a cue that it's time to maybe shift gears. And it was a 3-year assignment, which was incredible. Usually they're 2, and it was my first short tour, so 8 to 5. And I had some free time on my hands. And I said, "Well, this is great." So I trying to figure out what I was supposed to do, and awesome time pursuing an MBA and later an executive coaching certificate, always wanting to help teams. And as I was getting ready to pivot out of the military, I got this incredible opportunity, which was 6 months working with a venture capital firm called Squadra Ventures, and absolutely loved it. But what I really was jazzed about was I didn't realize there were so many entrepreneurs in America. I mean, America is very entrepreneurial. And I got the bug. I was like, well, I see all these wonderful individuals pursuing this path. I want to pursue this path. And probably not ideal with young kids, a wife, and in my 30s, but I really gravitated towards that way of life. And my time in the military, I was a SEAL, and SEALs by nature are very entrepreneurial. I came to find out. Just they get dropped off in some austere environments, so hey, here's the mission, figure it out. And so it was kind of the same feel, although just a different focus. And I've been doing that with some of my good friends and colleagues for the last 2 years, and started two companies. One of them being the Frassati Company, the other Valletta Industries. And Frassati Company is, I look at it more as a ministry, a missionary arm of my efforts, but it's an executive coaching, consulting, and leadership firm for teams and executives. And more recently, we've been putting on these retreats for Catholic CEOs, executive directors, presidents. And we really think there's something there. And I'd love to maybe unpack that a little bit in the show, but really well received. And that's been exciting. And that's actually opened up a whole nother chapter, which if we have time, we'll have to maybe unpack. And then Valletta Industries is a training company, and that's with my buddies from the teams, and we do all sorts of training from tactical to curriculum, maritime focused, and that's been great because I think I think there's just something about me that I tick with this idea of helping others get better. So in both lanes, Frassati and Valletta, it's taking people to the next level, which is great.
Yeah, praise the Lord. Well, first, thank you for your service. Thank you for giving your time in service of the country and all that you did there, and then how you've been able to transition now, into working in these industries and trying to help others, and particularly helping executives, helping leaders, helping ministry leaders, grow and be able to develop, their potential, which I think is awesome. As a therapist, obviously, I share similar passion in terms of wanting to help people. The work that I do is more targeted one-on-one, but certainly having the opportunity to do a show like this, or also, with speaking engagements, being able to help others, in those platforms as well. So I think that's fantastic. Now, I know that most people I think know what a Navy SEAL is, but for those who don't, just help us understand, like, what is that? And what did that mean, like, to achieve that? And then from there, being able to do some of the other stuff that you spoke about.
Sure. Well, apparently not everyone knows, because when I was courting my wife, she had no idea what a Navy SEAL was. I was like, this is gonna be great. She's way better. She's way more attractive than I am. She's way outside of my league. Yeah. And so I thought, well, maybe I can impress her by showing her I'm a Navy SEAL, and just over her. She's like, what is that? And I was like, you what?
Well, never mind. Swing and a miss.
Never mind. Yeah.
I'll try something else.
Try something else. Yeah. But yeah, so Navy SEAL, they're basically the maritime component of the Special Operations Command. Mm-hmm. But that said, the SEAL stands for Sea, Air, and Land. So they focus on a bunch of different disciplines. The saying is, jack of all trade, master of none. And the SEALs, they train in Coronado, California. So when I was a kid, my grandparents lived in Coronado. Wow. So we'd visit and I'd see them. And there's a lot of paraphernalia and clothing and posters all over the town about Navy SEALs. And I remember asking my grandfather and dad, like, what is a Navy SEAL? And they told me. I was like, immediately hooked. So as a 7-year-old, I was like, that's what I'm going to do. And when I was in middle school, my family actually moved to Coronado. And so then I was just totally hooked. I was like, you have sports coaches that are SEALs, so you're around them. Your friends, their dads are in the teams. And you realize, like, oh, wow, it's doable. They're not just these monster men that, drink ox blood and, large than life characters. They're humans that put pants on, and they're average individuals that do exceptional things, and you realize it's doable. So I was always drawn to the water. My parents had me swimming and playing water polo, and being right there by the ocean, I was into spearfishing and surfing and paddleboarding. So I loved and felt very comfortable in the maritime environment. And then when I was in college, we were in the thick of Iraq and Afghanistan. So I think there's that patriotic sense too, growing up in a very military-focused town, and wanted to do this since I was age 7, didn't go away. And just being young and idealistic, and I was like, you know what? I like the water. I like being part of teams. I like the idea of supporting America. Let's do it. And threw my hat in the ring, and absolutely loved, I wouldn't say every minute of it, but pretty close. Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty close.
Yeah, it's incredible. So what I love is just saying that, like, first and foremost, just being able to hold on to the fact that, like, this was a dream of yours from the time you were 7. And the little bit that I know, obviously, I know, like, just a little bit, you hear stories of, like, Hell Week and just the training itself to even get to that point. I think even right now I know it's not the SEALs, but there's some like reality show right now that like putting like celebrities through like, the world's toughest test that like military special ops guys have to go through, and how many of them can kind of cut the mustard of it. So there's always been this fascination of kind of like this, like pushing yourself to the limit in doing this type of, training for that specifically. But I guess what I'm saying is I love the fact that like, you said that this was a dream of yours from the time you were 7 years old, seeing SEALs, interacting with them, being in the town, growing up around all of that, and then just saying, man, this is something that I wanted to do. And that, like, not just something you do, but then you worked hard to be able to achieve that. Because not everybody who even has that dream, is capable of achieving it. And so just even as you were operating as a SEAL, were you cognizant of the fact that like, man, like this is like my boyhood dream kind of coming to fruition? Was that ever something you thought about, or was it just you're so busy, you never really had the time to consider that?
Yeah, those are great points. And I would say absolutely. I mean, not always. I mean, like you said, you're kind of engaged in the moment, or you're focused on the task at hand, but there's certainly moments where you pause and reflect, or at least I did, and thought, oh my gosh. And there were, to be fair, it really is an extreme job in the sense that there's times you're like, I cannot believe I'm getting paid to do this. Like, there's a childhood dream and I'm getting paid. There's other times where it's like, you can't pay me enough to do X, Y, and Z, but because it can get miserable. But
yeah, sure.
Even then, the crowd you're with, it's absolutely just a wonderful environment, because it's like-minded individuals. Everyone's really been screened and vetted in that space. Everyone's, operating at a very high level and competent and trustworthy. Not to make it sound all ideal, you're dealing with humans, so there's one-offs there to that comment, but an exceptional group of men for sure.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, I think that's encouragement, certainly, because now as you're shifting, so if I heard you right, you said like you were a Naval Officer for how many years? You said 10 years, 12 years?
About 14.
14 years, excuse me. But it was your last tour when you're like, oh, we're having a great time. And your wife was like, you're having a great time. Like, I'm glad, like, oh, okay, hold on a second. And so starting to think, okay, well, what's the next step going to be? Like this isn't something that's going to last forever. And so just even, I guess, in terms of marriage, what were those conversations like as you guys navigated that? Were you hoping to retire? Was your dream to stay, career military? And just how did that conversation kind of go with your wife and with your 3-year-old?
Yeah, that's incredible. That's a great question, actually, because this was actually a friction point. My wife's name is Lauren, from day one. So when we started dating, I had been in the military at that point probably 5 years. When we were engaged, I had been in about 5 years. I already had a deployment under my belt. I'd gone through the training and deployment, and at that point, I knew, or at least wanted to be in it for the long run. I wanted to retire and be a career officer. I loved it, and that actually came up in conversation, and she said, look, I don't think I want to do this forever. And I wasn't as for it as I could have been. I said, well, I'll do this for maybe a little bit longer and then I'll get out. But I really didn't have any intention of doing that. And I was a young man. I didn't know how to navigate that emotionally or have those hard conversations. And so I just said, oh yeah, and basically kicked the can down the road. And then it came back to roost in a big way. After my second deployment, when my oldest was born, I actually put my paperwork in and trying to hold true to that. I said, hey, we're going to get out. I've asked to get separated from the Navy. My wife was super thrilled, and I was not. I was really unpleased with the decision. I was like, and bitter. And I got a call from the detailer who basically assigns you to different spots to fill holes. Said, hey, Sam, we have this opportunity, SEAL Team 5, to be a platoon commander. Do you want to do it? We need your response in like 24 hours. And I was on a work trip. So I was away from home. in another state. And I called my wife. And so my wife, she has a newborn, she's pregnant, and we're living in Virginia. And I said, hey, I made a unilateral decision. We're going to California and we're staying in. And she was irate, as you can imagine, just a power move. And I think I've probably done maybe one power move in our marriage, and that was it. That was like huge. And she was definitely, it was a righteous anger. What are you doing? Like, we didn't talk about this. You did a 180 on me. So now I'm moving my very pregnant wife across the country and immediately start working up for my third deployment. And when you start a workup and you're gone, SEALs, they just train. I mean, they're good at what they do because they train all the time. And so she didn't see me for quite a while. My second son was born, and then I deployed. And I said, hey, I'll get out after this. Well, then there was an opportunity to go to teach leadership at the Naval Academy, which was like this incredible opportunity in my eyes, because I could see, hey, I'm going to need some time to transition into the civilian sector. This will allow me to get an executive or a master's degree and follow on certs to help ease that landing. And now this is like the third time my wife's like, are you lying to me? Like, is this just like a roller coaster? Or are you really intending to get off? I said, yeah, no, promise me. I promise you, after this tour, we'll get off. And so there was a lot of friction there for quite a while. And, I think I'm definitely at peace now, because that last deployment, we're doing good work, but you're also, I realized it was the first deployment I had being away from my children. Wow, like this kind of changes everything for me. As great as the work is, I realized at that moment, my primary focus should be on my wife and my children, and I'm not really focused on them right now as much as I could be or should be.
Yeah. Well, Sam, I really appreciate your honesty and just sharing the friction that's there. And I think for many of us, we can relate to that, certainly. But just as you were saying, like what your desire was, and not really being clear with that, with your wife, and how you kept saying, oh yeah, no, I'm going to get out. But then as a next opportunity, because I'm sure you did well, in your deployment. So of course the service would say, the Navy would say, yeah, let's keep moving this guy along, because he's doing great. But to have to make these decisions and to have these honest conversations at times is challenging. Because as you said, things change in your own heart, certainly in terms of like you didn't want to be away from your kids, but you also, from what I'm hearing, is, really wanted to listen to what your spouse's needs are also. And that's a challenge, in that space, to be like, okay, well, am I putting my whose needs are first here? Whose are more important? I think for any couple, this is a challenge as we try to have these discussions in terms of, well, what am I looking for? What are you looking for? Whose time is it to sacrifice? Whose time is it, to kind of take the lead on this? And that give and take, requires a lot of nuance and a lot of conversation that sometimes we're just not always equipped with, and just being able to kind of navigate those things. I think is, obviously you guys are still married, and, you've helped us out with our marriage retreats at Willwood. So we're grateful, that you guys navigated those discussions well. But it could have been a moment, where you could have been like, no, I'm choosing this over this, or I'm going to choose my career over my family. And I'm sure that has happened, not just in the military, but across the board, at times when we start tasting success, professionally speaking, we have to ask ourselves, like, is this still what the Lord is asking of me to do in this moment? Or is it that God is asking me to sacrifice this for something that's greater? And that act of discernment right there is certainly tricky business.
Yeah. And I don't think there's no black or white. And I think every marriage is different, and every situation can be different and nuanced. And, but I'll tell you what, like, if you're not communicating, you're not discerning and having those hard conversations, it's just going to compound those issues, and they will arise, and for us, it certainly did. And one thing, to my wife's credit, she lovingly like provided the space in the room to have those conversations. I just wanted to kick it down the road. Let's not talk about it. Let's just move forward. She's like, look, we have to talk about this, um, and we did. And she's been an incredible champion, and she was an incredible military wife too, to her credit. I mean, she carried a lot of weight and continues to carry a lot of weight now as her family's growing. And she's supporting this entrepreneurial path, and there's a lot of friction points there too. And she's just been just a steady hand and incredible.
Yeah, praise the Lord. Well, how has that transition been for you then, kind of coming out of service and into civilian life, and now the work that you're doing, through these various entrepreneurs?
Yeah.
Now, the other company you didn't talk about, and we could talk about this also, is your coffee. You have a coffee.
That's right.
company
Yeah,
also,
big
so-
yellow,
Big yellow. So thank you for sending the bag. And I don't drink coffee anymore. I'll share more about that in a little bit. But my wife did enjoy it, so
Good,
that's
good.
good. Yeah. So just how was that transition for you, kind of coming out of service and then coming into civilian and jumping right into entrepreneur work, which isn't a guarantee. It's not a steady check. So I understand that. And just always the threat of like, is the next check coming? Is the next deal
Right.
going to happen? That type of stuff.
Right.
It's always present with entrepreneurs.
Well, honestly, I think that transition started for the Blair family when we moved to Maryland, just outside of Annapolis, because that was really, although I was still in the military, it seemed very much like a civilian job. It was the first time I had an 8 to 5. And, short tours in the Navy are incredibly treasured. It's like, wow, the golden ticket.
What does that mean? I'm sorry, short terms. That's what
Oh,
is
sorry. So short tour means like your
short
base,
tour.
you're not going to deploy. It's very predictable working hours. And then sea tours are, hey, you're training all the time and you're going to deploy as on top of that. So you're just, you don't see your family for the most part on those assignments. And up to that point, those were the only assignments I had. Everything else, this is the first short tour I had. And it was interesting, Mario, because I was also under the same roof as my family for a long duration of time. And I remember maybe 2 months in, like thinking, well, like, when do I go on my next trip? Like, this is uncomfortable being around my family. And I remember after dinner, we'd go down, there's a Severn River in a park in our neighborhoods. We'd go down, sit in these Adirondack chairs, and my wife was just loving every minute of it. And I would just sit in these chairs like, what are we doing? She's like, we're just hanging out. I was like, I don't have time to hang. This is uncomfortable. And I just leave.
Yeah.
And I look back like, I can't believe I would just get up and leave. And my wife was patient. She's like, okay, what are you doing? I was like, I'm not just going to sit down and what do we do? Just talk? She's like, yeah, that's what we do in family. We enjoy each other's company. And so that took me way longer than you expected to actually settle into family life again. Because I was the guy that was on the road, come back, like, hey, Dad, good to see you. And it was real exciting. And then I was gone again.
Mm-hmm.
And now I was, I was in the home frequently. And there's pros and cons to that. Cons, I realized, wow, I have a lot of work to do integrating again, being a husband and father, and pro being, wow, I get to be a husband and father. And so that was the beginning, I think, of the transition into the civilian life. And obviously now I absolutely love, that's probably the one thing I do love about being an entrepreneur is the schedule. I get to be with my family and my children and manage my calendar accordingly. But I remember, I guess, leaving Annapolis, felt called to move down to Louisiana, where we are now. And so excited about the entrepreneurial path. And we had bought a home, we're renovating a home, I'm starting a business, and you've got a lot of cash going out when you buy a home and you're renovating it. And then as an entrepreneur, early days, you don't have a lot coming in. Mm-hmm. And I was just completely stressed. And I was like, Lord, what are you doing? Like, I felt called to come down here. And now I feel completely foolish. Like, do you see me? Like, do you see this? And are you are you for me here on this? And he immediately broke into that question. He's like, and it was very humbling for me, but this doesn't happen often, but in that moment he broke in. It's like, I am for you. I am for you. I'm for you. But he also needed to show me my pride in the transition, because I left thinking, oh, I'm going to be fine. I have this MBA from an Ivy League school. I was a Navy SEAL officer. I have this experience, blah, blah, blah. And I put all this back on me. And in so many ways, I just said, hey, Lord, hold my beer and watch me just crush. And he goes, and he held my beer and he, watched me fall on my face. And he's like, you want to do this together now? I was like, yeah, yeah, I do. And from that moment on, it hasn't necessarily been easy, but it's been different. And every day now, it's like, Lord, please accompany me into the workday, and realizing like he can sanctify, and he's interested in work. It's not just when I go to mass on Sunday or if I have the Bible open. He wants to communicate with me and use me as his instrument in every facet of my workday and family life. And as a Christ follower, you don't just get to take off your pack at 5 o'clock. Like, it's a 24-hour thing, and that includes business. And so that's been transformational. Just once I realized the Lord wants to be in this venture with me, it's not just he's here and I'm here and then we meet on Sundays. It's fully integrated, and that's been transformational.
Yeah, praise the Lord. Well, I'm happy that you've experienced that over the last couple of years, and that transformation has happened. So one thing that struck me as you were talking about kind of the shift from your tours, and particularly you said the sea tour versus the shore tour, and then how the shore tour was kind of a transition from military to civilian life. It kind of was a nice landing space for you to be able to kind of make that transition. And this will kind of develop into our conversation, with some of the work that you do with regards to peak performance. What I was thinking about was when we talk about like a sea tour, you said that like your trainings for a very specific mission, and so with that, all the physical skills you need to learn, all the tactical skills you need to learn, all the knowledge that you need to have about the geography, whatever the area is, all of that I'm sure is pumped into your training, and it's geared specifically for a goal. So I think about like, I've read another area that's been a major fascination with me are astronauts. I love reading about astronauts. How do people become that? I think I've read 4 biographies of astronauts at this point, just because I'm so fascinated by that process. And they all say similar that like before they go up to space, once they actually becoming an astronaut first and foremost is incredibly difficult. And then from there, once you actually get assigned a mission to go out into space is a whole nother process. And they will train for years just for a specific mission. Every little nitty gritty nuance of just turning a bolt on the Hubble Space Telescope a certain way, and every possible way that turning of a bolt could go wrong, you're training for every single possible scenario so that you're as prepared as possible for the mission. And so I'm just applying my little bit that I know, assuming it's something similar, that you're very geared. My point is that it's a training that's very focused for a very specific job. And then you go from that to something like being a teacher, 8 to 5, being at home, that it's like, oh, like what's the goal? what am I training for? Like what's the Sunday, football? Like where's the Sunday? Like, where's the, like, who's the opponent? Like, what's the point that what I'm preparing for? And it's like it's a shift of going from something that's very focused towards a specific kind of target towards something that's more steady and long-term, and saying, like, we're just going to, like, this is it. Like, I'm just going to sit on these chairs and enjoy my kids running around and look at the river. And like, this is it. Like, this is enough. Like, and I can allow this to be enough. I can allow this moment just to be sufficient for me and not feel like I have to be killing myself, going for those specific goals. Now, imagine you've probably brought some of that into your entrepreneurial, where you have objectives and kind of looking at 5-year arcs and kind of growth projections and plans and things of that nature, but to say that, and I really appreciate this, that like fatherhood, there is a goal for sure, but it's a very long-term goal, and that it's a much more steady kind of we just have to be present, operation, which and similar with our family as well, with our wives, just being present and allowing that to be enough, and not always feeling like we have to be moving on to the next thing to fix, or the next thing to accomplish, or the next thing to kind of do. I know that's been a transition for me as at times difficulty, feeling like I just have to be busy doing this thing, but then it's like, I just need to be present, with the family. And that shift from something that's very high octane, very goal driven, to steadiness, and presence. I can imagine, that must've been a challenge, and probably at times kind of continues to present, challenges. Anything more you'd like to offer about kind of that? Am I hearing you right? What do you think about this?
Yeah, that was, I think you nailed it. That was certainly the struggle in a lot of ways, thinking, okay, I just go, the semester's over, and, you may or may not get a survey from the students saying, hey, calibrate here or there. And then you repeat it, and it's like, well, when do we deploy, and how do I measure the success?
Yeah, right.
There's 100%. And in fact, there's also the other shift, the other dynamic that's worth calling out is the first year I was teaching. I remember being introduced to the class, and these are 17-year-olds. So my job was to teach the what they call the plebes, the first year midshipmen, and then I also taught the seniors, the first class midshipmen. So fourth and first class. And for the plebes, these are 17-year-olds right out of high school, and the course was Naval Leadership, 110, basically how to be a good human being. And day one, Mario, I'm going through and doing the curriculum syllabus day, and in a platoon, you rib on guys all the time. And if you sense a little blood in the water, the whole platoon will turn on that individual, because it really is, in a healthy way, a shame-based culture. And it's like
in a healthy way, it's a shame-based culture.
Way, yeah.
No, I get it.
I saw a little blood in the water with one of the midshipmen and just went for the jugular,
Yeah.
And I was like, and it was a funny comment. And I was like, oh my gosh, this kid's going to cry. He's going to cry. God, and I was like, oh no, I'm going to get fired day one. And there goes the shore tour, And I realized, like, wow, this is a totally different operating environment. These are untested entities. This is not a platoon of Navy SEALs.
Yeah.
These are young men and women. And, being in the Navy, a lot of profanity. So I had to tailor my language, had to tailor jokes, had all of it, and so that was a learning curve, which honestly was super helpful going into the civilian sector, because you don't talk to a teammate in the platoon the same way you talk to an executive in corporate America. It just doesn't happen. So there was a little bit of refinement, a lot of polishing those 3 years offered, and it was also one of these things where I was presented with an opportunity to say, hey, you can stay at your rank terminally to retirement, and you'll just be doing this for another 6 years. And as enjoyable as that shore tour was, I looked at my wife, Lauren, I said, look, I cannot do this for 6 more years. Like, I need, there's just too much ambition or drive to just stay in that arena. And so grateful for it. But to your point, those metrics are important to me and the way I operate. So
yeah, we've done great with the profanity thus far
I appreciate it.
In the show. So I got the bleep button somewhere, if it does come out, right? So
you're gonna need that handy.
We can always clean it up in post. So it's no big deal. Hey everybody, this is Dr. Mario Sacasa, just taking a quick break from my conversation with Sam Blair. I want to encourage you to check us out at faithandmarriage.org. At faithandmarriage.org, you can see a list of my upcoming speaking events. And if you're interested in having me come to your parish, to your diocese, to your conference, to your workspace, to give a lecture related to the things that we're talking about in this episode or the stuff that I've discussed in previous episodes, I'd be more than happy to come and offer a lecture that would bless and benefit and encourage your audience, to encourage them, to help them to grow more as people in their emotional, their relational, and their spiritual health. So go to faithandmarriage.org. You can see the list of speaking engagements I have there, and you can also contact me directly through the website. Let's get back into this conversation with Sam Blair. All right. So shifting gears here, now moving into this area where you're helping executives. And one of the phrases that I picked up on your website, and it's something that I thought about, a bit. I have a good friend of mine who's a psychologist in Miami, Carlos Gomez. I've had him on the show a couple of times, and he's talked a lot about positive psychology, and particularly this notion of peak performance. Mm-hmm. And what does it mean for us to achieve peak performance? How do we do that? And I'll give you a little caveat. So a place where for us, where it kind of came from was really out of kind of running. I have a Garmin watch, and my Garmin will tell me if I'm maintaining, if I'm improving, if I'm detraining, but it also tell me if I'm peaking. And the reason it tells me that is because you want to be peaking at race day. And so I've run a marathon, I've done a couple other races. I'm not Eliud Kipchoge, I'm not some crazy, this is just recreation, but I have done, some races like that, and I hope to do more, but I'm grateful that the device kind of sets up a training schedule where it backdates the whole thing. It says if the race is X day, then we're going to backdate, your schedule and make sure that you're peaking on race day. You don't want to be peaking three weeks before race day. You want to be peaking, on race day, because this training block that you've gone through, you want to be able to maximize the effort and get you to the best point of fitness that you can get to in this 4-month training block or whatever, so that you're peaking on that race event. So for you, like when you translate that type of language, it's easy to conceptualize that physically, like when you have a target, when you have a race, when you have an event, something like that. But how do you translate that type of language of peak performance into executive culture, in business leadership, and culture as a whole in companies, with the work that you guys do? What does that mean for you, peak performance, and how do you educate others in terms of the importance of being able to achieve that and have that with some regularity in the work that they do?
I really appreciate the sports analogy, and I think that actually translates really nicely. And at the same time, what is that Sunday or what is that race day in corporate America or in an office setting, and kind of reversing that, really the arena where a lot of this training can be showcased is in the boardroom, in the meetings, in the stand-up weeklies, et cetera, because that peak performance that we're driving at is really how do you communicate with your team and how does the team operate? Because you can be exceptional at your craft and you could be a lone wolf as a software developer or as an accountant, but if you're working together as a team, how are you managing, leading, and achieving results as a team? And that's a totally different environment. And it's actually also a hard sell to tell a corporation or a firm, hey, you really need to invest in leadership training. We don't have time for that, or hey, that's soft, no thank you. But in reality, if you invest the time and dedicate yourself to the craft of learning how to become a leader for your team, you're actually on path to 10x whatever environment you're in, whatever industry or ecosystem, because finance, accounting, software, IT, all of that's permission to play. But what's going to set apart a company is focus, effort, alignment, and teamwork, and the ability to communicate, observe opportunities, decide as a team quickly if that opportunity fits with the team and their capabilities, and then take action quickly. Because a lot of times you can sit there and deliberate, and that's great. And you're like, hey, there's an opportunity. But if you can't articulate that, pass that on, motivate the team and actually achieve results, it's just an idea. Mm-hmm. And so those meetings are actually crucial to success. And then how a team goes to those meetings, a lot of times it just can be, Patrick Lencioni talks about just like a soup sandwich. You're talking about everything and anything. And you walk out of the meeting, it's like, what did we achieve? Nothing. Right. So everyone hates meetings. So we'll work with teams and say, all right, look, let's talk about finance today. Let's talk about, operations on this day. And let's talk about future planning on this day. Just really organize the team around what are your capabilities, what are you trying to achieve, and let's break it up to actually bite-sized elements to conquer and get after. And so I would say the race day for corporations is the meeting place, is the boardroom. That's really where you can showcase those skills.
That's fascinating. Yeah. So thinking about, again, peak performance, some of this language comes out of, the positive psychology and the language surrounding flow and being in a flow state, which is viewed as kind of when you're in that space, in the zone, type of language of like being in that space where you feel that like, well, you talked about it earlier, about work and sometimes, when you've had the feeling, you're like, man, you couldn't pay me enough to do this type of job. Like having those type of experiences, you don't have them all the time, but having them regularly is very important for us. And it's healthy for us as humans, that our work, our environment, our lives, that we do have some of those moments of flow, those states where we feel that, wow, we're in the zone. We're like, my skills match up well with the work that I'm doing, and I'm able to really bring some energy that's real positive, that's really life-giving. That space is beautiful. But I love what you said, which is that moving beyond just the individual having a sense of peak performance or the individual having a sense of flow, really having a transition for the company as a whole to be able to have that. And I believe that one of the keys, as you said, has been communication and strategy in terms of just being realistic with meetings, not trying to do too much, but then also being clear with whatever the vision is that the company has kind of moving forward. But then also recognizing that you work with people, and working with people means that you have to attend to people's needs and the complexity of their circumstances. And all of that's good. And I think we're starting to really see a shift in that. For example, I'll say, sports, I'm a sports guy. I love sports, a whole lot. And so maybe you'll get this analogy. I don't know, maybe people listening won't know, but the Pelicans, are the NBA franchise in New Orleans, and I've been following the team for a few years. We were there for 10 years, which was great. They bring in the new GM, and the first thing the new GM does is he fires the coach. Well, not the first thing. He waits a year, he fires the coach, and he brings in an old school kind of hard-nosed guy, Stan Van Gundy, to run the team. And immediately, like, you see that the players are not buying into this kind of hard-nosed drive. Like, you got to just grind it out, work, all that stuff. All the stuff that we kind of grew up with, thinking that like this is what it took to be successful. Is just you stick it in gear and then you grind it out until you're exhausted and then you're done. Well, that old guard type of mentality like didn't click with the team. The team did not. They rejected it. They didn't want to play hard for him. And so he was fired within a year, and they moved into another guy, Willie Green, a younger guy who played in the league. And you immediately saw that the team connected with him, in terms of like had more soft skills. Like he was able to communicate his vision for the offense a little bit clearer. And you immediately saw that the team was kind of rallying around him and playing hard for him in a way that they didn't for the previous coach. And so what I think we've seen in sports is a shift that's happening. And that's why all this kind of Garmin, this training stuff is. I remember years ago going to another sports analogy. So for my listeners who don't care about sports, I'm sorry. Here we go. I'm revealing all my cards. Like you didn't know I'm a sports junkie. This is what it is. Jimbo Fisher, when he took over FSU, Florida State, football, he was the first to kind of institute these GPS trackers. And so he was like tracking the guy's effort. And so from that, like back in the day, you'd be like, you fumble the ball, pick up the ball, run 3 miles. You know what I mean? Like that was like your punishment. You know what I mean? Go run 3 miles. Well, you realize now like that doesn't work because all you're doing is you're wearing these guys out and they're exhausted come Saturday. And so now they're not peaking, So it's like we have metrics now that we can track how much people are working hard. And immediately you saw like reduction of soft tissue injuries, all that type of stuff was happening. So I guess going back to this and what does this mean even in our own lives and why am I bringing up all these kind of crazy sports analogies is that we often find like that we think at least for myself, and I know others, I'm a therapist, I hear this a lot, that we have to just kind of stick it in gear, always grind it out. We have to be hard on ourselves always at all times, to be able to achieve the success that we're supposed to. And it's like, that's not the way things are moving anymore. Like, and we now know that, like, having appropriate times to take care of yourself beyond just work is important. And then even in company cultures as well, companies that take care of people, like we've seen with like these sports teams that I spoke about, when the companies are caring for their constituents, for their employees, those are the environments that are healthier. Those are the environments that people succeed in, and that people excel in now. And so I think we have seen both in sports, and I'm hoping that we're starting to see kind of in an executive culture as well, is a shift away from this old school hard nose, just had to kind of grind it out all the time mentality, to the steadiness, to this recognition that, like, we can, if we attend to the little things, we attend to the meetings. Let's make the meeting Sunday. Let's perform the meeting well. If we could do these weekly meetings with excellence, we can, and then as a company, we're going to be peaking. And as a company, we're going to be moving forward. If we can take care of our employees and attend to their needs and help them kind of develop strategies of conversation and tearing things out, then we're going to find that people are going to respond and that people are going to want to stay. And I imagine those are the companies where they have higher retention, because people don't want to leave environments like that because they feel supported by the people that they work with. Thoughts? What do you think about everything I just threw out?
Great analogies. Yeah. And I'm glad you're a sports junkie. I guess I'd love to react to each of those in kind.
Yeah, give it to me.
And maybe leading out first, just with my own analogy, is rowing a boat. And if you have 9 individuals in this boat and they all have an oar and they all want to go a different direction, you're literally just spinning. But if you can have a coach or a team captain or an executive say, hey, this is the direction we're going, and even if you're not rowing at a super fast cadence, you're going to beat your competition if you're all aligned. So at the core of it, I think we try and help distill, what are you trying to achieve? The other thing too is, that with the hard nose, grind it out. Just a couple comments on that. I think you're absolutely right. I think you're seeing us as a whole, America, kind of shift away from that mentality. Not in every sector. There's still ecosystems or industries where that's expected. Investment banking, private equity. It's like, hey, we burn the midnight oil, and if you want to be part of the club, you're going to burn the midnight oil. But you also see some of the younger generations of analysts will come in and they'll do these reports and they'll spend, they'll be up till 2 a.m. They'll come in, they'll hand it to their managing directors like, it's garbage, and throw it away. It's like, well, what am I? Okay, I'm gonna maybe private equity is not for me. They'll maybe shift. But there's also a sense too, of that coach that you mentioned who's a hard nosed, if that really was the direction he's pointing at. And sometimes you do see companies that kind of take a digger before they rise, because they're like, I'm not buying into it. Something clicks, and like, I get it, and they'll rise. And sometimes it just crashes and burns because the nose never gets pulled up, or the chairman or the management team's like, hey, get this coach out of here. We're going to someone else. This isn't working. We don't have the patience for it. So they never get the chance to see the nose come up. But I like to share this story. Like, if you had the opportunity to have a boss, then we'll give 3 examples. One was a genius, resident genius, the smartest person in the room. The other one was the best at administrative duties. And the third one was so administrative, smart enough, but was emotionally intelligent. Who would you want to work for? And everyone's hands go up for the emotional intelligent boss. And I think there's a lot to be said about soft skills. Also understanding with soft skills comes the ability to say, okay, asking questions like, what are you good at? Or observing their employees or their teammates' gifts and their talents and saying, oh, wow, you would actually be really good over here. And now you start seeing the team coalesce around a common goal and humming, and you have the right people in the right bus, just like Jim Collins talked about in Good Grade. It's like, okay, now we're cooking with grease, because the team is focused. We've got the right skill sets, the right talents, the right order, and we're going in the right direction. They're going to beat your competition every time, because it's not enough now to say, oh, we've got good bookkeeping, we've got great IT, we've got good tech. Look at this new app. It's like, that's not going to set you apart. I mean, what's going to set you apart is leadership and people skills at this stage in the game.
Yeah, Ted Lasso has been the
Right,
icon,
yeah.
of
Right.
like the pop icon of
Right.
that.
Knows nothing about soccer.
Yeah, that's what makes the show brilliant. It's
Yeah.
like he's like, what's offsides? Please,
Yeah.
seriously,
But seriously, what's offsides?
what's up? Seriously, what's offsides? Explain it to me.
Yeah.
But and that might be an extreme, but nevertheless, the show has deeply resonated for a reason.
Yeah.
And I think even when it comes to like burnout, that's been an area that I've been fascinated with. Having experienced it for myself for the first time, compassion, fatigue, all of that. The literature surrounding burnout is that there's nothing wrong with you, in the sense that like, well, there's something wrong with you, but the reason that you're in the situation you're in is because of the environment that you're in. I mean, the vast majority of the time that people experience professional burnout, it's because of the environment that they're in, not because there's something wrong with them per se. And we can, in the specifics of that, obviously, that's not the point of today's episode, but just to say that like, if it's the opposite, I guess, of peak performance. It's the opposite of that, in the sense that like, I guess this would be a question as I'm kind of thinking out loud here. So thank you, Sam, for letting me kind of do that for a second. Like if somebody's listening to the show and they're like, yeah, this is great. I love it. I love this idea, of wanting to be in an environment, but my work situation isn't that. Or I'm trying to be an entrepreneur and I'm trying to get out there, but I'm just constantly discouraged by the fact that I'm not getting the results that I want. I mean, what are words that you would offer an individual? And maybe those are two different circumstances. So maybe we can pick the first one of somebody who's in a team working in an environment where they don't feel supported. They don't feel like their manager has the soft skills that you were speaking about. They agree with everything we're saying, but they don't quite know how to, they don't have the power, the authority to make a shift, in their company culture or their work environment towards something that's better, but they're just kind of stuck in that. What are your thoughts, or what words would you offer somebody in a situation like that?
I would say, I mean, no one's ever stuck. I mean, you can look at that situation and it might seem dire, and we can unpack it a little bit more, but ultimately, you can leave, there's, unless you have some sort of agreement in place. The other thing is fighting your corner, maybe looking at like, there's all sorts of different meetings that maybe are popular in your schedule that you can't do your specific task or what you're passionate about. Maybe just stop going to some of those meetings, or communicate like, hey, I'm going to just be focused on X, and start getting some traction in that direction. Yeah, I think agency is really important in that sense, realizing what are your gifts, what are your talents, what are you passionate about? And sometimes we find ourselves in these work environments or situations where we might be chasing a goal or a title or status or money because that's rewarded in society, or maybe our parents or loved ones would think highly of us because we have such and such a status or title, or we make or the amount of money we make, or miserable in our jobs. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's like, hey, take a step back. Is it worth it? Is it worth the stress, anxiety? The other thing too is oftentimes, I love this quote from Einstein. He says, if a fish tries to climb a tree, he's going to think he's stupid the rest of his life. Like, man, I can't do it, And there is like, well, you're not designed. Like, those are your gifts and your talents, Like, if I decide to get a PhD in chemistry, it's like, I would be miserable, So sometimes it's just taking a step back and discerning, what do you want from me, Lord? Like, what are my gifts? What are my talents? And then also asking the Lord and inviting him to this, like, where can I make a difference? Where can I be a light in this environment that maybe doesn't have the best culture? And do you want me to stay here and push back? Or maybe, do you want me to go look for something else? And can you open up another lane?
Yeah, those are great pieces of advice there. And I'll just kind of piggyback on that, kind of answering the question here myself also, that being in an environment like that's difficult. I've surprise for people who don't know, working for the church can be difficult in case people don't realize, sometimes the company culture in different places isn't always the best, even within the church, unfortunately. And I know we get disappointed by that because we expect that we're all kind of on the same page, trying to follow Jesus and do the work. That isn't always the case. And ambition, pride, dysfunction, managerial dysfunction, all of that is very much alive and well. I'm not saying it's everywhere. I'm just saying it's not immune. That's the point I'm trying to. The church, working in a church environment or religious environment, doesn't make you immune to those things just because it's a religious environment. And so, having seen different strategies and experienced it, I would tell somebody that if you are at a point where you were like you said, it's an opportunity for you to really kind of think through, well, what is really the frustration, and if it is there a frustration that like you can address, and you feel like you have the capacity to be able to address it, well then, listen, speak your mind respectfully, but say the things that you think you need to be said, articulate those things, and let's see where they land. And if there's a response that's a net positive, well then great, then you're working in an environment where people actually listen, people care, and maybe they just don't know, but that you brought things up, wonderful. That's a situation that you want to stay in. But let's say those things fall on deaf ears, or worse, get used against you in the future. Obviously, that would be a situation where you want to start, getting your resume together and start looking elsewhere. Because, like you said, we can leave, and not all. I recognize that, like, not in every circumstances people feel the freedom that they can leave, but But my point is that if you feel that you're in a situation that it feels like it's a closed door, and you have given it your all, and you feel like you've given it everything you can do, then you have freedom to be able to open up and bring that prayer to the Lord and say, God, open up another opportunity for me, and wait for him to open up another opportunity, and then go and make the movement that needs to happen. You see, sometimes, like, when it comes to like discernment and making changes in environments like this, but just this is life in general, like sometimes I think we cry out and then we kind of wait and we expect like the opportunities. Just sometimes those opportunities come to us, but sometimes God wants us to like say, okay, I'm crying out, but I'm going to step out now, and I'm going to take this initiative. And because you've put this frustration that I've experienced in my heart is so significant that it's causing me to act. And if I can't make change in the current environment that I'm in, then God, you've given me this for a reason, so I can actually start taking this and move this ball forward in another direction. In my counseling, I worked a lot with people who have, what I would say, like leftist, like religious orders, or seminarians or priests, or people who have like had like quote unquote, I would say, like, I don't want to call it this, but this is just what I'm going to call like failed discernments, where you're like, I thought God was calling me to this, and it was crystal clear, and then that thing just blew up right in my face. I've worked with a number of people like this, and one of the things I tell people repeatedly is that, okay, like, let's process the pain that you experienced in that moment, but let's not let go of what you felt was genuinely of the Lord. Like, let's not let go of what you genuinely felt was coming from God, and then distill that to its most pure form. And then sometimes this experience, this frustration, this discouragement that you're experiencing, God is using that, not that he desires that to happen to you, but is using that as an opportunity to refine what your desires actually are. You talked about being a fish. Okay, wonderful. Now, what type of fish are you? Are you a marlin, or are you a cuttlefish? I mean, like, are you like a puffer fish? Like, what type of fish are you? And sometimes we don't know the answers to that question. And sometimes it takes these kind of hardships in these moments for us to distill and to sift through, well, what exactly is it that God is actually calling me to? And then if I can get to clarity about that, like you said, then you can articulate that. Then you can start moving forward again with greater precision and trying to say, okay, Lord, open up the opportunities for me to be able to materialize this desire that you've given to me. And I think that process is challenging for people, because sometimes we just get so discouraged by our circumstances that we can easily fall into cynicism. We can easily fall into despondency, and to just say, well, this is just the way that it is, and I've abdicated my agency. There's nothing I can do. There's nothing that's going to make this better. There's no hope. Nothing's going to change it. And I would say, if you're at that spot, then it's time for you to leave. I mean, it's time for you to kind of start really praying and opening up hope again into your heart, so you can start seeing, okay, well, where might the Lord be calling me? Because that is not a fruit of the Holy Spirit. That's not what God is asking of us. That's not peak performance. That's the exact opposite of what we're trying to articulate. To be able to say then, okay, but then you have to take time and the patience to be able to move then into a different space. Because I think those things are real, and I know those hardships are there, but just want to encourage people. So
I love it. Yeah. And I think just kind of weighing in, maybe one last comment here. A
Give
little
it
bit
to
of
me,
a
Sam. I appreciate
half-baked,
it.
yeah, half-baked comment, but one nonetheless, is also looking at the comments that may be coming at you and sifting through them. It's like people can shape things, like in 2023, if you say, hey, I went to Harvard and then I went to, um, Yale Law School, that means something in America. But if you were to land on the moon, and let's say there's a guy that lives there, and you're like, yeah, I went to Harvard and Yale Law School. He's like, never heard of it. So I think sometimes putting things in perspective, like, are you doing this for recognition? Or are you doing this because you actually love it? The other thing on the reverse side is sometimes failure can be some of the biggest breakthroughs, but we frame it in such a way that we're despondent and discouraged, and we fail to actually see the beauty in those failures. Something I was just reading recently was I'm currently reading about Vasco da Gama discovering India. And the explorer that King Manuel sent after da Gama, so he was shooting around South Africa, and he went super far west and actually discovered Brazil. And then, but as a failure, because he also, like Vasco da Gama, hit India, had success. He lost a couple ships on the way home. And, he hit 4 continents on this trip, to include discovering a whole new continent, which, Portugal later cultivated, and that's why they speak Portuguese in Brazil. But he was basically cut off from King Manuel. He was called a failure, and he was like, oh, this guy, he messed up because he lost some ships and he got lost. Well, he discovered a new world, South America. But so he walked around Portugal just with his head down until he died. It's like, man, you're an incredible explorer, but because you want to walk around and frame it this way, you're carrying yourself as a failure. You're actually an incredible success. And so sometimes I think allowing the Lord to breathe life into those failures and maybe see it a different way. I think that's both your success, realizing don't take yourself too seriously because you went to Harvard or Yale. It's like that means nothing to most of the world. They've never heard of this, or Navy SEALs. Like my wife's like, I've never heard of it. You're not impressing. And then on the flip side, your failures really aren't that huge. Like sometimes you just have to reframe these things. Both successes, don't take yourself too seriously. Failures, don't take yourself too seriously. Just keep moving forward.
Yeah, amen. Just keep moving forward. That's it. That was a mantra of Disney's, actually. It's just keep moving forward. That type of thing. So beautiful. Okay, final question. Not final question. One final thought. If you have a few more minutes with me. So we've been talking about people, certainly failures, successes, but what about people who? What would you say if somebody feels that they have too many options, too many good options in front of them? I know sometimes that can be a discouraging and anxiety-provoking situation as well, where somebody feels like, I have so many great, not so many, but maybe 2 or 3 really good options. And you're like, oh, I'm struggling to make the right decision or to know which one is in the pole position, because you have to kind of force rank things and you have to be able to say, okay, well, one has to take the lead over the other. I'm willing to take this risk, versus and let go of the others. What would you say if somebody in a circumstance like that?
I would recommend this book that really highlights the exact point you're bringing up, which is called Essentialism by an author named Greg McKeown. And the whole premise of this book is the word priority is singular. So you can't have more than one priority. And he really continues to unpack that by saying, you can put 5% effort here, 5% effort there, 5% effort there. Ultimately, the reason it's called a decision, which, in Latin, I believe, to cut away, you have to make a call.
You have to make a call.
Yeah. And, to bring up another explorer, Cortez, burn the ships and say, look, there's a lot of great options, but there's an excellent one in here, and I think taking the time to discern that and say, where are my gifts? Where are my talents? Where's the Lord calling me to? And doing that legwork and then saying, yep, this is it. And then going all in. I think when we start hedging, that's where we can go sideways. And I bring up a very real experience. 200 plus guys started basic underwater demolition school, which is the training pipeline to become a Navy SEAL. And oftentimes when guys quit, they had a plan B. The plan B was, hey, if this doesn't work out, I'll just go back to my parents' farm. If this doesn't work out, I'll go get a master's degree. If this doesn't work out, I'll go into law enforcement. If this, blah, blah, blah. The guys that made it, like, that was all they were going to do. They're like, I am going to get through this. And you need that, because when adversity hits, it's very easy to shift to a plan B versus to ride out the storm, or to just push through and to keep moving forward. Say, oh, this is uncomfortable, I'm going to shift. And so I would say, if you know what it is on the front end, you can get through adversity. Because if you look at grit, hardiness, resiliency, grit is, passion and perseverance, like defining what are you passionate about? Because when adversity hits, that's when hardiness kicks in. Think, okay, you refer back to, why am I doing this? Because that's in the moment. You're in an adverse moment. Now you can tie into what are you passionate about and why are you going to persevere? Because you've already thought about that on the front end. You don't think about those things when you're in the middle of adversity. So it's very important to decide on the front end, I've got all these options. Okay, what are you going to do? Because you see a lot of people maybe quit, or they don't stick with things because they haven't thought about it. I think it's super important to do the discernment on the front end, so that when adversity or success hits, you're like, yeah, okay, cool. And you just keep moving forward, versus trying to make a big change in the middle of that unsettledness that may arise if you're in a certain industry or ecosystem or business or team or corporation, what have you. And Saving Nations is big on that in spiritual exercise. It's like, do not make any decision in adversity. And so I would caution people, really do the hard work, discern on the front end. Take a look at that book, Essentialism. It's excellent in a lot of respects, but it addresses that question as well.
That's wonderful. Well, I appreciate you recommending it. I look forward. I'm going to read it. I just wrote it down, because I think it's wonderful to be able to give people great resources. But love what you said in terms of saying, but sometimes that it is hard finding what that one thing is. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you do have a couple options, but it is just a matter of saying, okay, like based on the data that I have in this moment, you can't project down 6 years down the line what could possibly happen, whatever potential situation. You have to say, in this situation, knowing what I know, what's the best decision for me right now, or the best decision for my family, whatever that is. Then you just have to make it, and then you have to stick to it. And like you said, once you feel like you've made it, and then you move on from it. And you're like, all right, we're rolling down this path until something else becomes clear. But this has been discerned. This is a decision that we've made, and we're making this happen. And of course, what you talked about with sticking through things, adversity, made me think, obviously, with regards to marriage, in the sense that, like, yeah, we're in this, man. Like we have this vow, we have this commitment, we have this covenant, like, and we're in this, and we're not going anywhere. And so we don't want adversity, to happen. But we can't always control what adversity comes our way in terms of life circumstances. But regardless of what happens, we're sticking through this, and we're doing this together. So it's funny. We're kind of bringing back the old school mentality a little bit there. I mean, there is. So we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We can't just say, oh, it's all just emotional, which it is certainly. But there's also a sense of like finding those things, being committed to the path, and kind of moving forward with it. So,
yeah, there's a practical element there too. Like I think emotional intelligence is super important, but in whether you're using the analogy of basketball, work, or marriage, you still have to do the work.
Yeah.
And you still have to do the work. You can't just, well, I'm really good at basketball, so I don't need to practice, and I don't need to practice hard, and I certainly don't need to play hard every game.
We're talking about practice?
Practice, yeah.
Come on, Allen Iverson.
Yeah. In marriage too, it's like, you show up any given day and just give 30%. Yeah. It's like, good luck. That's going to be a fun conversation.
Yeah.
2 hours later, like, what are you doing? Slacking. So.
Yeah, that's right. But just make sure you're not judging the other person's 30%.
That's right. Yeah, you can't judge. Yeah, try and give 100.
Yeah, you're getting. Are you sure you're giving 100? I'm just joking.
That's your 100. Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm not sure I like that 100. That's all right. Now we're causing trouble here. All right, Sam. I've appreciated this discussion, man. So we've kind of dived into the work that you do. This has been awesome in terms of just hearing more about your SEALs and background, and just some of the stuff the ways that you guys communicate these messages, to companies. So if people are interested, they like to learn more about the work that you do, or they want to buy a bag of Big Yellow Coffee, where can they go? How can they learn more about what you got going on?
Yeah. So we're Big Yellow Coffees. That's just like a minority effort on my end. My buddy Doug Mann is leading that charge, and we're online, bigyellowcoffee.com. And then the Frassati Company, also online. We've got a LinkedIn presence, and then Valletta Industries that online as well. So
yeah, praise the Lord. Well, we'll have linked to those in the show notes. So if people are interested to learn more about the work you're doing and want to access some of the resources and skills that you guys are offering, then they certainly can take advantage of that. And final question I ask all my first-time guests, what gives you hope?
Yeah, I would say, well, there's actually a lot. But for me, it's the next generation. I'm starting to, just a quick story.
Give it to me.
So the other day, my youngest son was playing with the neighbors.
And how old is he?
What's that?
How old is he?
So my son Anderson is 7 right now. And they were playing on a swing. He bonked his head, and the neighbor felt terrible. She was a little bit older. And anyways, he comes home. He's got like a bump on his noggin, and he writes a letter like, "Please do not be sad. You are a great neighbor. I can't wait to see you. I love you." And he gave her a rosary. Well, I don't think they're Catholic. And so he walked over, gave a rosary, and he came home late for dinner. I said, "You're late, man." He's like, "Yeah, I was teaching the neighbors how to pray a rosary." I was like, wow. Oh my gosh. Like I don't think I've ever taught someone that's not Catholic how to pray a rosary. And so, I'm just grateful for the next generation. Like, wow, this is a different operating level. And I do think we're going to see a big shift. A lot of this is what JP2's teaching on, theology of the body. I think that hasn't even hit mainstream yet. And when it does, in conjunction with the next generation that's looking at things and really critical about how things are done, I think we're going to see a really positive shift. And I don't call myself an optimist, but in a realistic sense, I think that gives me hope. So.
Amen. Well, I appreciate that realism and that optimism, being able to say that as we continue to learn more about just what it means to be human and how to interact. Yep. And I think we're seeing that in a secular setting. That's everything we were talking about earlier. We're just allowing humanity to reemerge in these settings that it often felt like you had to check your humanity at the door. And so if we can reintegrate our humanity into these settings, then if a secular environment can do that, then how do we continue to push that forward, to bring people back to the fullness of what it means to be human, and not just looking at it through the scientific, but certainly even more than that, into the religious dimension as well, and bringing that relationship back into the fold. And I hope that happens, certainly. And I guess time will tell for sure, but I appreciate, the optimism and the realism, that you displayed in that, seeing that in your own kids and in the ways that they handle those conversations. So it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, Sam,
awesome.
I appreciate you coming on the show, man. Thanks for taking the time of your busy schedule to chat with me about these things. It's been a joy and a pleasure having this discussion.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been great, honored and grateful. So thank you.
All right, dear listener, well, that does it. It brings us to the end of this episode. I pray that it's helped you in some form or fashion. And if it has, then again, I encourage you, please, just to share it with one other person who you think would benefit from it. So as Sam said, that we certainly have times that we have to be able to stick it out and have grit and determination within our lives, but always in the context of discernment, always in the context of, Lord, what are you calling me to? Recognizing that hard work, even if you're in a difficult situation, will pay off in a future environment. So stay true to what you feel God has placed within your heart. Continue to navigate within the circumstances and the challenges that you're facing, because we all have challenges that we have to face. And as you continue to move that, you will find, I assure you, at some point, patience obtains all things, as St. Teresa of Avila said. As you continue to move through those challenges, you will find yourself in an environment where your best self, your best version is able to shine. So many blessings to you. Have a wonderful day. Check out past episodes of the show. If you're new to the program, thank you for checking out this episode, and just grateful to have you guys here with me. So many blessings to you all.